This is an R Media podcast. Marie Claire presents You're Gonna Want to Hear This.
I would have liked to have children. I absolutely love children. I delight in being an aunt. And if anything, I actually feel that the greater, more important role for me right now is to be an aunt. I'm going to want to hear that what comes next could be more wonderful and beautiful and more human than we can possibly imagine.
Hello and welcome back. This is You're Gonna Want to Hear This, the Marie Claire podcast where ordinary women, just like you and me, share extraordinary stories. I'm your host, Georgie McCourt, editor of Marie Claire Australia. Now, there is a word that I keep hearing everywhere at the moment, and I think it really speaks to the anxiety that so many of us are carrying right now. That word is collapse. I think for a lot of us, definitely for me, that anxiety stems from this creeping feeling that we're under threat from all angles. Climate change is obviously such a big one. Then there's AI and this whole technological revolution that we're living through. It feels like our society is changing so fast, and there's so much we don't fully understand and also can't quite control. That is a lot to take in. Today's guest has been sitting with all of this and that idea for a very long time. You're going to meet Sarah Wilson. She is a journalist, author, and activist, and she has spent more than a decade researching collapse, what it means, what it looks like, and perhaps most importantly, how we live through it. You might know her from I Quit Sugar, but her work has taken a very different turn in recent years. You also might be one of the 500,000 people who's seen Sarah's TED Talk about collapse. But what I find most compelling about her is that she has let go of hope. Yes, you heard me correctly. And what do you do if you don't have hope? Well, I'm going to find out today. We're also going to talk about what's really going on with AI and the tech bros, and about how we make decisions, whether that's about work or money, even whether we should be having children, when the future feels this uncertain. Sarah is also going to talk about moving to Paris, which she did just before she turned 50. And as a side note, that is a dream of mine, and I was so fascinated by what she said about it. She's also going to talk about what life looks like for her right now and why she has never been happier. This is a conversation that will shift how you see the world and your place in it. So let's get into it and meet Sarah. Sarah, welcome. How does it feel sitting in the offices at Park Street? You're very familiar with these offices.
Oh my goodness, it's so bizarre walking back in here. I sort of was, so for anyone who's viewing this and wondering why it is that I'm familiar with the offices, it's because I was the editor of Cosmopolitan.
And I remember, do you know, I applied for an internship when you were editor.
Oh, and did I not give it to you?
No, you didn't get, but that's fine.
I'm sure it was not my decision. Do you know how many times that's happened to me? Really? Where people said, I didn't get the internship, or I applied to be your assistant. And I'm like, oh, God, I'm so sorry. Anyway, yes, it is quite strange, but I feel there's a different energy in here. Back then it was in the days of Kerry Packer, who, would give you kind of these very bizarre instructions. He'd say, yeah, you can do it, but if you fail, it's on your head. And it really was, it was that kind of a culture. But I liked it. I liked that kind of culture.
You must feel like a completely different person from when you were, from who you were then.
Yeah, I do. I mean, in some ways, I think my values are very much the same. I haven't shifted, I was the only editor that would ride a bike each day to work, and I never took any of the I've never owned a handbag in my life, ever. And so I was not interested in that side of things. So I'm still that person, that's for sure.
I want to go straight to Paris because I think so many of our listeners, it is a dream to move to Paris, and you did that just before you turned 50. Mm-hmm. And it is something, there's like this romantic sort of, dream of moving to Paris. And why did you decide to uproot your life and move to Paris? Because in the book you talk about how you were looking for love. Tell me about it.
Did I find it?
Did you find it? Well, that's my next question.
So I've been nomadic for I think almost 17 years. I've live from one place to the next to the next. I've lived out of maximum 2 bags of belongings, and which I really do carry around with me. And so moving to Paris is not like it's this big ordeal where I'm, carting my book collection and a couch, across the world. It was, well, I can just go, and I was able to get an artist visa. The French are super, super welcoming of creatives into the country, and they look after you. So I've got a 4-year visa as a writer. And so it was quite seamless from that point of view. But the real motivation was a bunch of things. Firstly, I've always loved it. When I've ever been in Paris, I've felt like they're my people. There's this mix between the Latin craziness and then the socialist care and sort of goodness. And I first landed there when I was 18. I was hitchhiking around Europe and I got mugged in Nice, which was a very common occurrence for a girl that looked like me, which was means I looked like just about anyone in Europe. So they would rob you for your passport back then. And I had to live on the streets of Paris for about 4 weeks. And the internet hadn't been invented back then. And so there was all this kind of bureaucratic protocol with the embassy needing a certain amount of money to get a new passport, but the bank needing a passport for me to get money. And so, it was one of those catch-22s. So I lived on the streets, and it was the greatest freedom I've ever felt, because I had the clothes on my back and that was it. I broke into sort of youth hostels and different places to sleep each night and stole food and jumped the trains, and it was wild, And the French held you in that, that's how I felt. So I've kept coming back over the years, and I've always found that France is a place where the people are curious. And I have a chapter in my book where I write about how the chairs in Paris face out to the world.
And I love that.
Anyone who's been to France would know that in the cafes, the chairs don't face each other, they face outwards. And it instills, or perhaps reflects, a curiosity in the people. So I've always felt you walk around and people are looking at you, trying to work out what your story is, and they'll ask you a question and they genuinely want to know what's happening, to you and your world. So that has always felt right, and it particularly felt right to write a book like the one I've just written. I wanted to be in a place that felt very, very human. Then on top of that, French men.
That's full stop.
Yeah. Look, the cliches about the French men are pretty true. They're cheesy, they send you mixtapes, all of that kind of thing. But again, they've got a natural curiosity, and there's a natural respect for women, which stems from the fact that the schooling system there is predominantly co-ed and public. So young men grow up with young women who they watch doing super well at maths and English and everything, and they're just mates, which is how I grew up. I went to a public co-ed school myself, but it's increasingly not the norm here. Yeah.
How has dating, you do write in the book that you went there to find love. Have you found love? What is dating in Paris like?
So it wasn't so much just to find romantic love. It was love for humanity, love for life, really. But yeah, I met a handsome Corsican wild guy who was, lives outside the system, was a motorbike racer, and we had a great, sort of affair, and we're still very, very close to each other, but it's just very, very difficult. He lives in one part of France, I'm in the other part of France. I don't know what's going to happen. I honestly don't know what's happening between men and women. Although I should say that I do cover that topic in the book as well, the polarisation, the fragmentation that's happening between men and women. It's happening for the same reason that so much of what is happening in the world, it's the same reasoning. So, yeah, it's one of those things that I've ceased to attach my identity to, but I love dancing in it,
Which I think is wonderful, to not have your identity based on it and just, enjoy the present moment. Now,
yeah.
I want to get onto your incredible book, I Eat the Stars, and I was speaking to someone earlier about how fabulous your book titles always are, and they're just, I love the title of this book.
People always say that once the books come out and they can see it on the cover, but I always have to fight to get these bizarre titles. Like, it's like I've got to write these big long essays on why it will work. And no, the people will understand what it means, you know.
Where did this title come from?
This one, I Eat the Stars, it came from a poem by a NASA astronaut called Rebecca Elson, and she was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, I think at 37, and she passed away at 39. She wrote this book called A Responsibility to Awe, which is just the best title ever. And in it, she has a poem that goes, "As an antidote to fear of death, I eat the stars." And the message there is a message that's come up with philosophers and spiritualists throughout the ages, which is to fully live your life, you need to confront death. You need to be alive to the finiteness of life, to be able to feel the urgency to live life hard, fully, and in love now. And so that's really the message of the book. So I came across that poem while I was writing, and generally I know, the title comes to me while I'm writing the book, and then I get very attached to it. So it involves writing to the estate of, Rebecca Elson, asking her family if I could use this line, and they then review my work and they gave me permission. So yeah.
Incredible. Okay, so collapse is a word that we are hearing everywhere right now. When you use it in your book and in your work, and it's a subject that you've been researching for many, many years, what are you actually describing?
Yes, that's a really good departure point for this conversation. I'm pretty much describing everything. As my dad said, it really is your book of everything. So collapse is essentially best described in terms of understanding what it's not. So we live in a civilization, and really people refer to it as the post-industrial civilization. It's roughly 270 years old, started just after the Industrial Revolution kicked off, which is when we started using huge amounts of fossil-fueled energy, coal and that kind of thing. And so it produced all of this technology and produced a whole bunch of abundance, and that's our civilization. Now, over the last 5,000 years, there have been dozens of complex civilizations like ours. So you think the Roman Empire, the Mayan Empire, the Qing dynasty. There's been quite a number of them. Some say, around about 40 of them. Every single one of them has become sophisticated and complex, but they then collapse because of the complexity. We're at a fork in the road moment, and we can either let the forces of collapse take us down, kicking and screaming and probably causing mass civil unrest, or we can actually see what's happening, get ourselves very clear on the truth of things, because everything I'm talking about is stuff that is being discussed in think tanks around the world, at universities. This is not new information. It's just that it's all coming together right now. And tipping points are going all over the place. We've been told about this, and we're now in it. We know that the system is making our children sick. Neurodivergence. Why are all these kids so sensitive now? Because their little systems are picking up on things not being right,
And that stresses parents. Like I know with my kids, it becomes more stressful because you've got kids who are addicted to their devices. Then that becomes stressful as a parent. But what you're really talking about is a more simple life, which is like you live an incredibly minimal existence.
Mm-hmm.
And it kills me that we're so tied to material possessions and, conversations at, dinner parties or whatever. Like it's so tied to materialism and it's so boring.
Particularly in Australia, I've got to say. I come back here and people talk about their laundry renovations. Since when does a laundry need to be renovated? I mean, it's just, it is at the next level because
I'd love to see the expression on your face when someone's sitting there talking about a laundry renovation.
I'm not known for keeping my mouth shut when I have an opinion, but I do try to be reasonably polite and compassionate. And, living in France, there is not the same mentality. There is more of a sense that you live now, and you share the resources you've got. My friends who are my age living in France don't own their own home. It's quite unusual to own your own home. People don't have cars. They have very simple lives. They have a winter coat, and when the winter coat starts to wear out, then you get a new one. So it's a very different mindset that I don't think Australians are aware that they're really behind the curve on, if you know what I mean, It
really is such a different mindset. My boyfriend was born in Montreal but moved to France, to Toulouse, when he was 5, and he lived there till he was 18. And everything you've just described, that is him. He gave his car to his daughter because she lives in Canberra, so he gets bikes everywhere, or he gets the train. He's not attached to a big house, which so many people I think in Australia are. And it's been really interesting because since I got divorced, that sort of like the cultural expectations around what my life should look like have just all been eradicated, and it's so freeing because I look at him.
Yeah,
he doesn't care. He loves travel. He wants experiences.
I come
he
back
doesn't
here and
care
people
about the
are
other
either
stuff.
shopping or they're doing clean outs. And it's, when you're not doing either of those things, you can get on with far more beautiful things, like reading a book, hiking, spending time with your children. The whole sort of insane Moloch kind of concept of working 2 jobs so that you can give your children the best starting life by getting them into the expensive private school, which then means that you end up as a parent becoming exhausted and not being the best parent to your child, and nobody wants that. It's ridiculous.
It's a cycle so many people are in. I see people who renovated their houses, and I once did this with my ex-husband. We're under so much stress. It's tense. You're fighting over money.
Yep.
You're not being the parent you want to be. And it's a system that doesn't work.
It doesn't work, and it cannot hold, and it is now collapsing under the weight of so much moreness. There is not enough money on the planet to solve the problems that we face. Not even a small slither of the problems that we face, because the global financial system has also been leveraged off, and I won't go into too much detail. You can read about it in the book, and it's probably not interesting enough for a podcast, but it's been leveraged off the idea of there being infinite amount of fossil fuels to keep, creating, and the plastics and the trade routes and the things and the technology and all of that kind of thing. And there simply is not the energy to do it now. We're watching what's happening in Iran, in the Strait of Hormuz. It's classic collapse. Of course that would happen. Of course it would. If we were not a culture, a civilization so dependent on fossil fuels, then something like that probably wouldn't bring the world into collapse. But here we are. We live in a world where we're so dependent, and not just on the oils, of course, fertilizer, the rare earth minerals and everything that come through that strait.
You mentioned hiking just earlier, and I love hiking so much. It's just one of my favourite things to do.
Was it something that you started doing post-COVID or during COVID? Because that seems to be the...
After COVID, I moved out of Sydney to the Southern Highlands, and I back onto National Park.
Okay.
So I literally have a bush as a backyard, and it's magical.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is. I always loved the bush because I grew up going to various little holidays near the bush. But now, like more so in the last 5 years, I need that like dose of nature. And I love in your book, there's a bit at the beginning where you describe yourself as a compulsive hiker.
Yeah.
I love that you've added the word compulsive because it's just like, it's such a like opposites to hiking, which is all about calming, and then there's the compulsion. Tell me about your relationship with hiking because it's such a part of who you are.
Yeah, I've been doing it from a very, very young age. It's been a way of modulating my nervous system. I worked it out. My body worked it out as a young kid. I would take off and just, I grew up in the country, but I would take off for, what people probably would have called adventures. But for me, it was just movement in nature. And then it kind of just became, yes, a compulsion. It became my way, my fix for coping with, my anxiety and my other various conditions that I've developed over the years. And so wherever I travel, I find a way to get out there, I can navigate public transport systems and get off to wherever I'm. And in Paris, I would hike at least once a week. I sort of just catch a train out of the city and find a forest and sort of run/hike/dance through the forest. And in my last book, This One Wild and Precious Life, also a line from another famous poem.
Such a great title.
Yeah. That was a poem by Mary Oliver. And again, her estate gave me permission to use it. I think I'm the only person that's been given permission to use one of her poems in the title of a book, which is wonderful, because she was a naturalist. She wrote about the beauty of nature and how important it is to one's sanity. But in that book, I write about just all the benefits of being in nature, and you don't have to think about it. If, you just walk out there and it hits you and it does its magic. even just basic things like seeing the fractals. Fractals are the repeated patterns in nature. So the petals of a flower, the fronds of a fern, the rings of a tree, you know. When we see those patterns, our eyes, our retinas are also made up of fractals. There's this kind of congruence that occurs in our brains in the recognition of it. And we get this sense of belonging to something larger. Like that just happens by opening your eyes and seeing these things. You don't have to use your brain. And, you know, the fact that we emerged from all fours onto 2 feet, however many millions of years ago, it was at that point that our prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for discerning thought, it developed as a result of that because our brains got bigger and because we were able to eat more food. We could grab food with our hands. So walking in nature goes at the same pace as discerning thought. So that's why when we walk in nature, we can work out things. We can actually come back into a relationship with ourselves. So yeah, that's a little bit of a tangent, but all of my books I have to hike to write. So I head off with a pencil and a piece of paper down my running bra, a credit card and a train ticket on the other side, and off I go.
You're right. You walk and write.
Yeah. Nietzsche did the same thing, the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. There's a bunch of philosophers he had a hole in his walking staff and he put a pencil and paper and he would write on the mountains. So there's a lot of philosophers who did the same thing. Again, I worked that out when I was writing that last book.
And I mean, it doesn't surprise me because you need the space to write something as huge as I Eat the Stars and all your other books. You need space. You can't, like, modern life can get so busy and suffocating and claustrophobic.
You need the expansiveness, and we think better. It's, you know, it's called cathedral thinking. It's also the same thing when you go into rooms with high ceilings. You can have much more expansive thinking. So if you're out in nature and you've got the sky above you, you can think more clearly. And that sounds all terribly theoretical. But I think anybody listening to this has experienced it. And once you can tap into that more and more, it becomes a compulsion, you know? It becomes your thing that you know works.
Let's talk about hope because it is a topic in your book and it's so interesting because all the interviews I do, you've got to have hope and, you know, you've spoken about hope in the past, but you write that your breakup with hope felt like leaving a toxic relationship, which was such a good description. Where were we supposed to be by now with climate and what led you to let go of hope? Because we're not where we were supposed to be.
Well, I sort of touched on it at the top end of this interview that we were being, you know, for the last, I think, I would say 5 to 10 years, we've been told, hey, look, if we all rally together and get solar panels and get an EV and vote climate, we can do this thing. And the hope that we were being told, you know, there's still hope. The hope that we were being told was still there was to return to business as usual, to return to the old normal. We can just go back to our abundant living where we have air conditioning on and we can go to the mall and buy whatever we want. It's just now going to all be wrapped in recycled paper, you know? And I sat very uncomfortably with that, but that was the messaging that we had to use to get people to get on board this message and to do it in time to meet those Paris Agreement deadlines. Well, we've gone past all of that. There's not a single nation on the planet who has met their Paris Agreement commitments. And so as a result, we passed 1.5 degrees Celsius last year. You know, we're now cruising to 2 to 3, possibly a lot more by the end of this century. And we've been told that's uninhabitable. You know, so we've been told this. It's not like we haven't been warned. That shouldn't be new information to anyone listening to this. It's just that we thought somebody would take care of it. So my first chapter in the book, I say I've broken up with hope because hope keeps us in this addictive kind of cycle of thinking somebody, and a very adolescent cycle of thinking that somebody else out there will do it. And
also, do you think that it's not our problem? Like, someone else will do it. It's not my problem.
Yeah. I mean, it's just it's as bad as pessimism. Pessimism says we're not, you know, we're not going to make it, so who cares? I'm not going to bother. Optimism and hope says, oh, you know, yeah, no, I think it'll all turn out, but somebody else will take care of it. It's very, very similar. The net result is people do nothing. So, and, you know, there's terms that's been used in the collapse sort of community is hopium, you know, this addictive addiction to hope. So when you break up with it, you've then got to go, well, what else is there? What is going to get me out of bed in the morning? And I really do believe that humanity needs a North Star, something to kind of move towards. There's the book Man's Search for Meaning that talks about how if we have a how, if we have a why, we can handle any how, Viktor Frankl. And I think that is really fundamental to the human experience. So what exists if we give up on that notion of returning to business as usual, that we're going to be able to keep the status quo? Well, the answer is truth. When we actually realize what is actually going on, studies that show that when we can actually recreate congruence, and because you've got this incongruence when somebody's telling you, oh no, we can return to normal, but the stats and the studies and the science is showing no, we can't. It causes a great deal of anxiety. And I actually think a lot of people in Australia who have been really hell-bent on the green economy transition have a kind of cringy feeling. It doesn't add up. It can't add up. There's not enough fossil fuels to create the infrastructure to keep the green economy going. And behind the green economy is this idea that we can just keep going, spending, growing, and not taking responsibility for things. So that's sort of that's the nuanced explanation behind my breakup with hope. I still have hope for big, beautiful things that we can all roll our sleeves up and do, like the idea that humanity is capable of rising to this moment. I have hope in that, I do not have hope that the green economy will save us.
What about relief? Because you've written about how letting go of hope and this pressure on hope, there's just immense relief. How does that feel?
Yeah, well, like I say, the relief comes when you solve that cognitive dissonance. You get that congruence happening once again. And that's what people wrote into me and said they felt this incredible relief, because all of a sudden you're not trying to hold two kind of competing truths in your being. What it does is it opens up your ability to see a whole bunch of other possibilities, and it also gets you staring very squarely at truth, but also, and particularly the truth of our death. Humanity will come to an end at some point. All mammalian species do. I personally don't think this is the moment where we should be, giving up on life. I think we should be fighting for this. But we're really at a crossroads. Like, the existential risk experts that I've interviewed, and these are at Cambridge and Oxford primarily, that's where most of this work has been done, they're pegging things at a 1 in 7 chance that humanity will survive till the end of this century. And I say to people, that's 1 in 7 is about 17%. Would you get on a plane if there was only a 17% chance of surviving? Sorry, it's the other way around. If there was a 17% chance that you wouldn't survive, and you just wouldn't. You'd probably do something about the situation. So the AI realm in particular, the technologists, the dudes, the tech bros making the AI, they're particularly pessimistic. They have this thing called a P-doom figure, and they talk about it all over the place. Everybody has a P-doom figure. Elon Musk's is 20. That means he believes there's a 20% chance that AI alone will wipe us out by the end of this century. But others are putting it at 50%, 80%. These are the men who are making these products and are presumably thinking about their children at some point, So they're building bunkers and they're doing all these other things. They believe in transhumanism, this idea of upgrading our intelligence with technology, essentially giving up on the human body. So names like Peter Thiel, who owns Palantir, that's his thesis, Mark Andreessen, who owns, the big consultancy firm responsible for Doge, but also advises the US, the Trump government. They've written manifestos on this. This is not stuff that's a conspiracy. They have openly spoken about it, and it's almost too much for us to take in. So anyway, the threat is real. However, I have, my book is essentially mapping out how a lot of the stuff that people are saying is going to happen won't happen because we'll run out of energy. But what will happen is this simplification. It's coming no matter what.
I think we're all craving the simplification. I know I absolutely am. Um, so there is obviously a lot of panic about AI. I mean, it's dominating conversations everywhere, but you argue in the book that it won't actually take over humanity. Why is that?
I think it's very unlikely to. So, I mean, we can break it down because I think a lot of people's fears right now is that AI will come for their jobs, and especially young people. That's where I think a great deal of threat is at. I also think a lot of men's jobs, for the first time in history, white collar jobs are under threat, and that's a worry because the studies show when large amounts of educated men, midlife men, face some kind of redundancy, it invariably results in some kind of violence, particularly against women and children. So that's something that we need to be aware of, and bracing ourselves for and preparing for and having conversations about. So in terms of AI taking people's jobs, that is happening right now. And, the AI dudes like to talk about this idea of a universal basic income. Don't worry, we're going to take all your jobs and then we're going to just pay you this basic income and you can just attend to your hobbies. I'm sorry, I don't trust those men to come and dole out their fortunes.
No way.
It's not going to happen that way. So there's a couple of things I'd say. So there's that. And then the second piece is it's going to come and kill us, right? Singularity is forecast in 2027. It keeps being brought forward. And it depends on who you're speaking to, of course. But we're not far off from it. We don't know. So, and of course, the tech bros like to tell us we're so much closer to the, ultimate sophisticated technology because it's a marketing spiel as well, and they've got to put it out there because they don't want the Chinese or the Russians or anyone else out there to beat them to the thing. So they need to brag about their products so the US government gives them more legal rope to do whatever they want. What I would say to people who are concerned about all of this,
which is probably all of our listeners, let's face it.
Yeah, and rightly so. On a big picture scale, what I would say is I don't think the AI dudes are going to be able to pull this off. And this is not just my, spiritual belief. It's based on the fact that the data doesn't stack up. So we will run out of viable energy before they can pull off what they're trying to do. Now, they're currently buying up old nuclear plants and they're establishing nuclear reactors or to create not nuclear reactors, nuclear energy plants to be able to fuel their AI. That's happening without us realising. And that's quite recent because they've realised they need this kind of energy. That's not going to happen in time. And what will happen before they're able to pull off all of this? And they say that, look, our AI will be able to solve the energy problem. Just give it a little bit longer. It's going to, it's in the background, toiling away, trying to find a fix to this, this energy issue that we face on the planet. I would argue by the time whatever it is that they have in mind will happen, we're going to burn through that carbon ceiling. And so climate warming will make it extremely difficult.
One of the biggest questions women are asking right now is, should I still have children? What's your answer to that?
Gets me really upset when I hear that question. My answer is absolutely. Because what is going to get us through this, what's going to see us, hopefully, and I mean that very intentionally, through this and hopefully create a new civilization, a new normal on the other side of all of this, will be our humanity. And to have children is to be human. It is probably one of the most human things that we can do, is to produce a beautiful, beautiful child. I sort of say, if you want to stick it up the system, if you want to stick it up the tech bros and all of these forces, do all the things that make us uniquely human that the AI can't do. Have children, create art, and I have a chapter on that in the book, create art in the apocalypse. Because touching those things, touching the possibilities is what makes us human. And I have a bunch of arguments for where art fits into moments like this. And art has always flourished in these liminal periods throughout history and produced, communism, Buddhism, Judaism, all the isms are created precisely in moments like this. But I think that that is our role right now, is to be as fully human as we can. And one of the gifts of both collapse and of, say, the AI takeover, so-called takeover, is that it's forcing us to ask ourselves, what is it to be human? What makes us human? Because AI forces us to ask, what can't AI do? What will it never be able to do? And it's getting us to actually have a relationship with our humanity again. I call it a homecoming. And collapse does the same thing. I ask this question that comes from the philosopher Erich Fromm at the end of most of my podcasts. What is left if we lose it all? And when you actually think about that, you've got to get down to some pretty simple but beautiful essences, you know?
Yeah.
And for some people, that would be children. And I get that. And so, the answer is we have to keep on living as fully human as we can and get rid of the bullshit. Don't get rid of the children. Get rid of the bullshit job. Get rid of your LinkedIn account. Get rid of all of that stuff, the laundry renovations, the private schools. You know, I would say to parents, be present with your children, get them okay with analog and hiking and riding a bike and learning survival skills, dare I say. Send them to scouts, rather than working yourself doggedly to get them into some stupid school, which is actually not going to be very helpful in the future.
I haven't spoken to you for a few years, but the last time I spoke...
Was I ranting like this last time?
Well, I love a rant. So that's my favourite kind of person. You have to rant.
Well, there's urgency to all of this.
But the last time we did speak, we spoke about motherhood, and at one point, and I don't know how you feel today sitting here, but you did want to embark on motherhood and you have a journey there. Where are you right now compared to where you were? I think it was 5 years ago, maybe even longer.
Yeah. So that book I mentioned before, This One Wild and Precious Life, and I think that was the book that we were talking, you interviewed me for. There was a sort of a secondary thread to the book. You know, I was hiking around the world in the footsteps of philosophers and so on. I track all these amazing hikes. But the story was also about my experience being told I could never have children due to an illness, and then having a pregnancy in my mid-40s, and then having several pregnancies after that and losing the children. It was a big journey which paralleled all the rest of it, that was going on. I am philosophical about it. I would have liked to have children. I absolutely love children. I delight in being an aunt. And if anything, I actually feel that the greater, more important role for me right now is to be an aunt. I interviewed the incredible Indigenous theorist, and she's the biggest mind I think I've ever met, Vanessa Andriotti, and she wrote a book called Hospicing Modernity, sort of similar concepts to what I sort of explore. But she calls herself a black belt auntie, like she's doing it hardcore. She said, I'm a black belt auntie. I sit at dinner tables and lunch tables and the kids come running around, and she said, I hold firm, And so that's kind of where I'm at now. I know that there's a job to be done. I write about creating islands of sanity, and that's essentially what I'm trying to do now. And, I've started my book tour and I've been doing a few events, and a lot of young people are turning up. These are people in their late teens and early 20s coming along to buy my book, because I think they are seeking islands of sanity, people who are talking the truth. Young people can see what's happening. They're waiting for the adults in the room, those of us who happen to be born into this very difficult, uncomfortable time in history, to step up and own it and to be adult. And that takes a bit of energy, so maybe I couldn't have done it if I had lots of kids in tow. Do
you still feel like a pang or a longing
I do.
To have children?
I do. It feels, it does. And, equally, I don't have, a romantic partner in my life. But I can also see very broadly that that's not my path. Perhaps it wasn't what I was meant to do. And I'm becoming very peaceful about a lot of things. And I can say, Georgie, I'm the happiest I've ever been in my life. My mum says this to me when I was writing the book, and I write about this.
You look really happy. I mean, you always look fantastic, but you look happy. You look content.
Things make
peaceful.
sense.
I want to ask you about your friendship with Liam Neeson. How'd
yeah.
that come about?
Yeah, he wrote a beautiful blurb on the cover of the book as well.
There's a lot of incredible people who wrote amazing testimonials about your book.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Well, there's this kind of network of us supporting each other in this work. So Liam, this is a bizarre story. I mean, everyone who knows me goes, "It's just so you, Sarah." So I was camping in the desert, and
of course,
yeah, with some of my family, and we came into town to get water and supplies. And my phone got a message on Instagram, and it was some guy, and he said, "Look, this is really bizarre. My dad has just read an article about you, and he really likes what you're on about, and he's not on social media. Could you swap email addresses?" I'm like, this is kind of bizarre, and then realised his father was Liam Neeson. So I said, "Oh, yeah, sure, here's my email address." Anyway, came back into town a couple of days later. My sister-in-law was beside herself. She was, very, very excited about all of this. She was planning bridesmaid dresses. Hilarious. Anyway, came back and we email responses backwards and forwards. We chatted to each other. And anyway, this friendship started. So we wound up talking on the phone. He was in the States. He was working on a movie at the time. And I was in Australia for some reason. I can't remember now. I can't remember. Actually, I was doing a TED talk. Mm-hmm. And so we were talking on the phone a lot. And then eventually he said, "Listen, I'm going to come to Australia." So we met up and we had dinner together. It's weird, right? You can't go out to a restaurant. So yeah, because it's strange. And so it's just continued as a really wonderful friendship. And we talked about God and spirituality. He's a subscriber to my Substack, and he was reading the book along with all the other subscribers and giving me feedback. And there's a little bit in the book, I don't know if you saw it, where I said, Liam's asked me to make sure you realise X, Y, Z. And at the end, I put a little note, because I have margin notes.
Which I love your margin notes.
By the way, Liam approves of what I've told you here, But yeah, we touch base and talk about, I don't know, death,
life, death,
the point of it all. He's a wonderful human. Yeah.
My last question. The name of this podcast is "You're Going to Want to Hear This." Mm-hmm. What is one message? I mean, there's like 1,000 messages in your book, and you definitely need a highlighter. It's so incredible. What is one message that you want our listeners to hear?
So you're going to want to hear this. You're going to want to hear that what comes next could be more wonderful and beautiful and more human than we can possibly imagine. And I really do believe that, because I think there is a momentum building, and I think we're heading that way. We're at a fork.
And this is why you feel happier than you've ever felt before. Like I do really feel
I'm very emotional.
Yeah.
Like I cry constantly. And it's my way of dealing with it, but a lot of people around me are crying.
Crying feels good.
Yeah, and I wailed my way through that book. I spent hours in fetal position just clawing at myself, feeling the pain of everything, the bigness, the responsibility that's before us. I think I could be interpreted as being a bit whack, but I've got some solid scientists.
But aren't the greatest people in the world a bit whack? Like, I think
when we die,
people.
when they die, we tend to think that they're great. But no, I think I'd be worried about myself, except that very, very credible scientists have backed my thesis here, and so I think, and I also do feel that a lot of people, I hope people watching and listening to this, are sensing some truth to the magnitude of what is going on. And they're not wrong to be feeling it. That's probably the other thing I want to express to people. You're not wrong to be feeling that there's something big going on. Yeah.
Sarah, thank you so much. It's always such a pleasure speaking to you. I learned so much. You inspire me so much. Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity. I've enjoyed the space. Thank you.
Oh my God, getting into that lady's brains, one of the smartest women I've met. Sarah, thank you for taking us right to the edge of collapse and then lighting a candle there, which you do so well. If you're listening and feeling maybe less doom and scroll and more, okay, well, maybe I can live with this, that is the whole point of this conversation. We've got our big girl pants on and we are ready for it. I wanted to share that this week we have hit some huge milestones, and it's all thanks to you. From myself and all of our team who cares so much about the stories that we share, we also want to say a huge thank you. We've seen some amazing growth in the number of people listening, we've spotted it on the charts, and we're honestly so excited and a bit humbled by all of it. So consider this a big, big podcast hug from all of us to you for every download, share, and message of support. But keep us on our toes, we're new and growing, so tell us who you want to hear from. What do you want us to dig into? And what's keeping you up at night? Because we have built this show just for you. Head to our show notes at marieclaire.com.au for all the details. Bye everyone.